Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have just a very powerful show coming right up. And our special guest today is Robert Kopecky. He's been on the show before to talk to us in regards to his near-death experience. And today he's here to share with us his new book, How to Get to Heaven Without Really Dying. Now, Robert survived a traumatic childhood and traveled extensively as a young man. And he's had a variety of lives in different careers. You know, one is a ski bum, a factory welder, a monumental sculpture fabricator, underground cartoonist, an award-winning illustrator, art director, and animation designer for the New York Times, Sports Illustrated, PBS Kids, and more. So he's had this just great background. His journeys in life have been punctuated by 3 dramatic near-death experiences. And so today, Robert's here to share with us his new book, How to Get to Heaven Without Really Dying. So let's welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you, Marianne. It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to more moments with you. And by the way, it's How to Get to Heaven Without Really Dying.
Yes, it is. And what a big thing that is. I think for a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute. How to get to heaven without really dying? How's that even a thing?
Well, I'm a multiple near-death experience survivor, which is, nothing to brag about, really. In fact, it's best to avoid it if you possibly can. But I have had these extra-dimensional sort of afterlife experiences, and so people ask me, how do you get to heaven, or what does heaven look like, or what's it like there? And I said to people, I think I'm going to write a book called How to Get to Heaven. And everybody said to me, without really dying? And I thought, okay, that must be the title of the book, because what I'm trying to do is to, translate the experiences I had into something that's achievable for anybody, because the circumstances of near-death experiences can be quite different for a lot of people. I mean, despite those regular motifs you hear about the light at the end of the tunnel and, the field with your relatives that have passed away and stuff like that, a lot of people have those similar things. But for a lot of people, they're very, very different. I had 3 of them myself, and each one was completely different from the other. And so I started wondering, what does that mean? I'm not going to the same place every time. So what there was in common, and what there is in common with all near-death experience people that I've met a lot of them now and know a lot of stories and stuff, is this feeling that we get in the afterlife, this being surrounded by love and being completely connected, being part of a greater mind or of a larger intuitive intelligence, being folded in to what I call in the book, I call it divine consciousness. And so that experience is something that I have had, mostly through meditation, but at times in my, normal life, nothing to do with the afterlife. So I knew that was available. That shared aspect to every near-death experience was available here and now. And, I started thinking about this great quote from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, which is, the kingdom of heaven is already spread over the earth, but men don't have eyes to see it. And I thought, that's true. My experience of what I experienced in heaven, quote unquote, is available here in this life. And there are ways to go about getting there, and that's what this book is about.
Wow. Well, and so you talk about your 3 different, near-death experiences being so different, with the exception that you're surrounded in that feeling of love that you get in meditation too. Is that like the common thread that you see?
Yeah, that was what's really common about the different circumstances. I mean, the first one, I had an out-of-body experience in a car accident where I looked down on the accident and I saw my body. And I could look around the whole neighborhood and stuff. I saw things that I could not see from the ground, and I went back and checked them and, made sure of it. And I was kind of shepherded off to sort of an interview type of a thing. a pastoral place is kind of the only way that I can describe it. Mm-hmm. But I had that sense of being folded into love, of being fully and completely supported, of not having any boundaries anymore, but of being part of this kind of divine intelligence or divine consciousness that I speak of. The second one, I had a kind of a drug overdose, a toxic reaction type thing, and I experienced what's called a life review, where I had sort of scenes from my life that were shown to me, and not the greatest hits, but these sort of seminal, kind of pivotal moments that I should have paid more attention to when I was there, kind of. But nonetheless, I had this experience of being wrapped in love, of being fully supported, and never alone, always in the presence. Although I didn't always see a personage, I was always in a divine presence. I was always supported that way. And the same thing happened in the third one, where I got beaten up by a bunch of skinheads. It was my least favorite.
Yeah.
And knocked unconscious for a long time, and they stomped and kicked me, and terrible stuff happened. But I went to a place that was not quite as heavenly or light. It was a little bit more elemental, and I was surrounded by more kind of divine entities, as it were. I don't remember the distinct characteristics of them all, but it was all loving. It was all totally supportive, and again felt like I had no boundaries, but was part of it all. And that experience, that sort of sense of oneself as being an energy being, a being of light, a spiritual being, is the thing that I try to give people a means to attain in this book. That's the common thread in all three of my experiences, even though I went to different places, so to speak.
When you were in these different places in each of your NDEs, were you thinking, what am I doing here? Well, this is different. Or did you have any thought process, or there was just like a knowing that, these were the things that you needed to do while you were there?
That's a great question, because it's kind of a combination of it. Do you stay yourself? Are you yourself when you move on? And I was. I had a sense of myself, although I don't recall having a body at all. I don't remember looking down and seeing my hands or any of that kind of thing. And I did feel that way, particularly in the first one, in the out-of-body experience. I thought, what is going on here? Like the next instant, I'm at the top of the telephone pole, and there's moths flying around the lamp, the street light, and I'm looking down, and there's people running out of their houses, and it took a minute, It was like, oh, that's my car. Oh, that's a body that's kind of hanging out of the window there. It looks familiar, And that initial sort of recognition of the strangeness of it, the sort of surrealist aspect of it, fades. It goes away, and then I just inhabited where I was and had this, sort of greater sense of being folded into it all. Less and less of a sense of my own individual identity or boundaries.
Mm-hmm. It just seemed to kind of envelop you, it sounds like.
Yeah, the thing that I started to feel like was that I'm part of this great energy mix, and we always are. I am now sitting here in my aging, somewhat dilapidated body, unfortunately. The more I relate to these physical forms that I'm in, the harder time I have with, the physical nature of things. The more I relate to just being part of this vast energetic field of love and potential as a spiritual being, then the more grace and ease I can live with all the time. And so once particularly the out-of-body experience that a lot of people can induce by astrally traveling, by techniques to do that, I've never been able to accomplish that on my own, but in meditation I come pretty close to it. But once you've experienced that, it's pretty hard to get the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, you know. It's not hard for me to imagine myself as this diaphanous, effervescent, lighter-than-air energy cloud, kind of, that happens to have all the same thoughts and ideas that I do, but is not necessarily bound to, these material forms.
Well,
but then I am. I mean, you got to do what you got to do in the world, in the real world, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we came here to do specific things and learn specific things. So, we do have to have that earthly experience.
Right. Yeah, and that's from the first experience that I had of being outside of my body. I call that the lesson of perspective, of having that kind of spiritual perspective on life. The second experience I had of my life review, where I saw these moments that I had not paid the proper attention to before, I learned the lesson, I call it in the book, of presence. So these are actually sections in the book, the perspective and presence. And then the final one, where I was forced back into life by this group of spirits telling me that I had done things wrong and that I needed to go back. That was the nature of my third NDE. That I call the lesson of purpose. That we are here for a particular reason. It has to do with the karma, the spiritual data that we carry with us from life to life, and the things that we need to sort of figure out and realize in ourselves so that we can become fully unified with God, so to speak, which, we are all the time. Anyway, that's one of the great realizations that it's good for us to make, is that we always are part of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because a lot of times people in, the spiritual community, when they learn about NDEs and out-of-body experiences, they think that to be spiritual or to have that deep connection, that you have to have an NDE or, something close to it. There's this thought process about that.
Right, but I'm a person who, the first NDE I had was a long time ago now, and there was not very much awareness about it. There was no real community to speak of. I think that Moody and Kenneth Ring, Raymond Moody and Kenneth Ring and PMH Atwater, I think they had their books out, but I didn't know about it. And there certainly weren't any sort of superstars of NDEs, and nor were there studies that showed how many people have actually had them, which with cardiac arrest victims is supposedly somewhere around 15%. So there's a lot of people having them. But I didn't learn from them. I went right back into my material life and sort of lost track or suppressed them. And it wasn't until I really had catastrophes happen in my life. I had these sort of transitions or passages happen in my life, lost relationships, people dying, the end of jobs, these sort of smaller deaths where I had what you might call an ego death that made me have to change the way that I lived. And once I changed the way I lived and started meditating and studying some of these wisdom texts and stuff that I love so much now, then sitting in meditation, the power of the NDEs came back to me. They all arose in me, and I realized them all, and I realized what they meant, what they had been, and how I had suppressed them. And so it wasn't having the actual NDEs themselves at all, but this experience of spirituality aside from them in this life that was available to me all the time. That's what really made my breakthrough, what I consider my personal breakthrough, So you don't need to. You may need to die in the sense of an ego death or of having to go through something that's profoundly difficult, that opens your heart up and makes you teachable, that makes you humble enough to be teachable, kind of, if you know what I mean. But you don't have to actually die.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do, and it's no big deal. I mean, I know that it seems like an awful big deal, and it is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at that level, at the level of our spiritual being, it's not. However, the thing that you have to keep in mind, my wife Sue had an uncle named James Hillman, who is a famous philosopher and author. He wrote a book called The Soul's Code. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a book called Suicide and the Soul back in the 60s that I happened to pick up one day. And I read this thing, I can find it right here. He said, it is illusory to hope that growth is but an additive process requiring neither sacrifice nor death. The soul favors the death experience to usher in change.
Oh.
And I thought, yeah, that's it. Whether it's, the death of the person I thought I was, the end of a marriage or the end of a relationship with somebody who passes on or something, or it's our actual death where we move from one life to another, our souls apparently require that experience for our growth. So we need to embrace it as best as we can,
Mm-hmm. Well, in your book, you have this whole chapter on kindness. So how does that play a part with all of this?
Yeah, well, the thing about heaven, here's another thing that's consistent, is what everybody imagines it to be. When everybody thinks about what heaven is going to be, everybody imagines it as being a pretty nice place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they have good cappuccino, and it's kind of like Tahiti or something. It's always kind of warm and pleasant, and everybody is really kind. Everybody is really helpful, right? Everybody has a very generous spirit going, and so part of gaining the perspective on this world that can help you to experience it as heaven, it has to do with these principles, like kindness, for example, that I call rungs on the ladder to heaven. And in the book there, they are kindness, honesty, humility, forgiveness, compassion, and service. And if you can plug into each of those things, for example, into kindness, and just be as kind to everybody that you encounter, as much as you possibly can be, in as sincere a way as you possibly can be, and try it as a challenge. Try it as an experiment for a day or two, and you'll discover how incredibly powerful it is, and how almost immediately your life will start to resemble more what your ideas of heaven are when you put that energy out into the world and experience it coming back to you. It is awesome. Suddenly you're surrounded by all these allies and friends you didn't even know were there. You walk in with an open heart and a smile on your face, and you look over and there's somebody you've never seen before, and they're looking at you kind of like, hello, yeah, I know you. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, there's that familiarity.
Yeah, and it changes your experience of the world, and that's what heaven feels like, right? That's a little piece of it right there. And so with kindness, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. With kindness, that's one of the rungs. That's what I call one of the rungs on the ladder to heaven. And then I deal with each of those with honesty and humility and forgiveness and compassion and service. Each of them get their own chapter, trying to give people the means, the principles here in this life to, start to experience this world like heaven.
Yeah, be able to really develop here. Because I think a lot of times when people are considering heaven on earth, it can get a little confusing. Like, what does that even mean? Because they don't even understand that within themselves.
Right. Well, because we're human beings and we have this need for gratification on a physical level, right?
Mm-hmm.
The material world comes with a lot of attachments. You know, it's like a vacuum because it comes with a lot of attachments. Because we, think that we need or want certain things, or that we have to become or be seen as certain things. We have expectations and desires, and those are the things that come and go and do not provide us with real happiness. Right? So we conflate those with our ideas of heaven. Heaven is not a place where you drive a BMW. Heaven is not a place where you win, where you're a winner. There's no competition in heaven, Heaven is a place where you are completely free from all of those material expectations and desires, and so you live a liberated life in spirit, which you can do here as soon as you stop worrying about what the Joneses think, or who you're supposed to be. That's another aspect of dying. Maybe the only part of you that needs to die is who you're supposed to be.
Ooh. Well, and what an important thing that would be, because then you can be who you truly are.
Right. Yeah. When you're reduced, and this is something that I think the death experience does, and the humility, the profound humility that the circumstances of dying or of these different kinds of injuries give us, is this place that we can grow from, where we can become teachable, because we're just authentic. We're just what we basically are, right? There's no game in our game anymore. There's no artificiality or edifices. When you've lost I had an experience losing my wife, losing my job, losing my health, all simultaneously. And I was just reduced to sort of an egg without a shell, but I became teachable. It was a moment where my life could turn around. And so that profound humility was the point at which transformation could begin, where really learning could begin, because I was my authentic self. I had no place to go but up. Mm-hmm. I had already disproven the idea that all this add-ons, all this stuff that I could accumulate, and all the things that I could put on to people had failed. They didn't work for me. So success has a completely different definition in heaven, so to speak.
Well, and so with that, for our listeners, what are like one or two tips that they can use to start to bring, heaven into their daily lives? I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about it, but, what are some thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I think there's 5 rungs that are in the first and the perspective part of how to get to heaven without really dying. Kindness. Just try that. Just start with that, because it's amazing. It is really great. Mm-hmm. It'll change your life in a wonderful way immediately. The honesty, which just makes your life so much simpler and so much more direct and so much less complicated. I have stuck my foot in my mouth so horribly on a couple of occasions and was so humiliated that it had nothing to do with humility. It only had to do with humiliation, And I've had to try to clean up things in my life and try to put things over on one person and try to remember what I had told the other person, and it was hell. That's a form of hell. So honesty. Maintaining honesty is a big part of it. That kind of humility that I'm talking about, that the sort of symbolic or real deaths that we experience give us. When you think about the most important people in your life, lots of times they're not, the most famous or infamous people. They're these kind of simple, intelligent, loving people that mean a lot in our lives, that don't stand out a great deal in a crowd, but seem to really know how to do it. They seem to really be connected. So humility in that sense. And then forgiveness, having forgiveness in your heart. In my first book, How to Survive Life and Death, I had radical kindness, radical forgiveness, and radical surrender. and as my 3 tips for happiness. And radical forgiveness, where you're not carrying resentments or forming resentments. Walking around carrying somebody else's luggage, is a definition of hell to me.
Oh yeah.
So being able just to turn that stuff over, just to recognize that everybody is fighting the same battle here, and so you can't hold anything against anybody. And recognizing that the awful things that happen to you happen to everybody, and if you allow them to define your life, then you'll carry them around forever. So letting go of them will free you up. Compassion, then, is the 5th rung that I have, where where you really recognize us as all being the same thing. You recognize the same impulses and needs and inspirations in everybody, and so you can really follow the golden rule, so to speak. I think the Dalai Lama says that if you want to be happy, show compassion. If you want other people to be happy, show compassion.
That's an easy answer.
Yes, it's kind of the answer to everything. I think, in fact, he said that if there's one word to sum it all up, compassion is it. And for animals, and for the world, for the planet, for the shape that our environment is in, all of that has to do with a compassionate consciousness that we can project into the world. And then service is the final one. So if you make yourself of service to other people, what can I do for you? How can I help somebody? And the great wisdom texts teach us that you do it without expecting anything in return, and it works even better that way. I remember years ago I went to a retreat, and I had just become a spiritual person, so to speak, and there were nuns working at this place. They were making the beds and cooking the food and stuff, and we had spiritual speakers in the mix. And I saw these nuns, and I thought, these poor ladies have retreated away from real life. They're all hiding out here in this beautiful natural place, and I feel sorry for them. Some years later, after I had a spiritual practice in place and I'd done lots of meditation and service on my own, I went back to that place. And I saw these same women working there, and I realized it was heaven. They had a fantastic and have a fantastically beautiful life, just devoting themselves to taking care of pilgrims that are trying to get a clue, like I was. And so service, making yourself of service, whether it's just holding the door open or going out of your way for somebody, what can I do for other people? That's a very big part of it. And so those 6 rungs, I think, are things that we can practice in everyday life that will really give us a view of this world as heaven just through our actions, the actions we take.
Well, those are such great tips, because a lot of times people get stuck going like, how can I develop this? And it must be really hard to do, to have like a heavenly experience while you're here on Earth. Yeah,
well, it doesn't happen by sitting around and thinking about it, unfortunately. Unfortunately.
That's true.
You have to get up and do something. You have to take action. And so in that first section of the book, I describe those actions and how you can kind of put them into your life, because you'll notice that when you're out and about and you're doing something and you're participating and you're contributing, how much nicer life seems than when you're just sitting there watching CNN.
Or any of those shows.
Right. I'm not picking.
Yeah. We're not necessarily picking on CNN, but it's just an example. But so that kind of takes me to my next question, because how important is meditation, and how well do we need to meditate? Is it something that we really have to dedicate time to? Does it take a long time to do that as well?
Yeah, meditation is incredibly effective. It really it works when your mind isn't working. Meditation works when your mind isn't working, and it does a couple of things, I find. One is that it enables me to become a witness to my thoughts so that I'm not just sort of subject to whatever craziness is running through my mind at any particular time. The judgments and comparisons and expectations and all that kind of stuff that's sort of a natural process of our regular thinking. I can become a witness to it in kind of the same way that I was out of my body. I was looking at myself. You hear these thoughts going through your mind that are defining your life, and it's like, I don't even want to think about that. Yeah. But meditation allows you to do that, and then it also connects you with everything. It connects you with everything. And I remember when I first started, I would sit cross-legged, and I would think, okay, I'm going to sit here now. I'm not going to think about anything. Okay, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not thinking about anything. And then I'd start thinking about, my rent being due, or what I was going to have for dinner. I'd get caught up in these loops of some resentment, somebody had done something. And so sitting there not thinking of anything seems kind of crazy. But we need to take the time to sit and experience actual stillness and to be able to sort of become analytical about what those thoughts are and be able to make space in our mind, right, and kind of find the room in between those thoughts by just sitting quietly. So even if you just spend 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of a day, it is a practice. Meditation is a practice. And it will work, even if you just spend 5 or 10 minutes during the morning. Then if you do it again in the evening, what happened to me was that after a while I discovered that it worked so well, it made me feel so much better about everything that I wanted to do it more often. And then it's not far to having just a regular practice where you really look forward just to sitting and relaxing and maybe, putting on some kind of a beautiful binaural soundtrack, that is hemispheric balancing, or a beautiful piece of classical music, or an Om chant, something that might help you to slip into that place of stillness that where, in many ways, heaven kind of exists like that feeling of ease and grace that occurs when you meditate enough to be able to divorce yourself from those aggressive thoughts that we have a lot of the time.
And I like how you started off talking about, just kind of be aware of your thoughts and, and see what's there. It's interesting. I can remember hearing, I was at an event years ago where Esther Hicks, it was with Jerry and Esther Hicks when Jerry was around. Sure. And Esther was talking about how she was meditating so well and clearing her mind that later on when Spirit came through and they were finally were able to get through and talk with her, they said, we've been trying to talk to you for the last 6 months, but you keep clearing your mind every time we do.
Well, yeah, because voices arise in your mind, and they arise from the field of intuitive intelligence. I'm almost conversational with my guides, so to speak, at this point. I don't often talk to everybody about that sort of thing because a lot of people will just look at you funny, when you. But for your audience, I'm sure that I'm safe in saying that I have spirit guides, and one in particular that is my go-to guide, and I can hear her, and she's feminine to me. I can hear her voice speaking, and it took years of me sitting there to really realize that's what was happening, But a big part of it came from a big part of that capability came from recognizing what my crazy voice was in my head, and divorcing myself from it. I hear what you're going on about there, Bob. I used to call him Bad Bob, in fact. I hear you, Bad Bob. I know what you're griping about over there, and I'm not going to have anything to do with it right now. I'm going to move over here in my mind to this place that's clear and serene. And I don't know what my personality is when I'm sitting over here, but it's better than that. And so one becomes capable inhabiting that space where these voices then start to come through to you. And you'll, in my case, I only speak for myself, I'll say, "Are you there?" And I will hear a very authentic, "Yes, I am." Or I'll hear my own voice going, "Well, I should be. I should be here. You should be getting something good. Here, I come up with it." No, that's not it. That's not you. And so I call that analytical meditation, where you look at your thoughts, you actually are aware of your thoughts, and you move to the space sort of in between them if you can, if at all possible. There's also physical meditation where you count your breaths in and out, which is, a great means of stilling your mind too. Or you become aware of your heart beating or the blood flowing through, or you look at what's inside of your eyelids when your eyes are closed. It's not completely dark. There's stuff going on there. And so you use your body, your physical form, as a means to enter into that state too. And then there's also what the Hindus call bhakti yoga, which is devotional. And that you could consider that like a Catholicism or Judaism. Anytime that you see somebody chanting or having a mantra, anytime that Jesus or Buddha or Allah serves as the central personage in your devotion, in your meditative prayer session, then that is devotional meditation, and having that one, that focus of your heart's devotion is a good way to still your mind too. So there's a few different ways you can go about it,
Yeah, and you've listed so many great ways. Do you find that usually someone will kind of gravitate to one of the ways of meditating, and they feel that just works for them better?
Yes, I do. I think a lot of people, a great inroad is the physical meditation where you count your breaths. And then you can expand on that into what the Tibetans call Tonglen, where you breathe in pain and you breathe out comfort, that kind of thing. You have on each breath you have an aspect that you're addressing and releasing, kind of. I think that the physical means is the way that generally most people enter into it. But I also find that once you get into meditating as a practice, I know for me, all three of those things kind of mesh together after a while. I am aware of my physicality in meditation. I'm aware of what my thoughts are playing in my head. And I'm aware that I am part of this greater unified divine consciousness that serves as a focus for me. That the more that I relate strictly to my physical form, the harder my life will be. And the more I realize that I am already unified with God all the time, that the solution is always there already, then the easier and more grace-filled my life can be, more heaven-like.
You got to love that. And all this is kind of bringing me to my next question for you. It's kind of a loaded one, So hold on, okay?
Okay.
You, in your book, you talk about, and you said you think that women are somewhat, like spiritually superior to men. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, that is kind of a tough one, and I have got a lot of interest in that in different ways. Yeah. I'm a guy. I'm a man. And it's a difficult club to be a member of, frankly. I just find it challenging at best. A lot of the essential, basic, elemental attitudes of maleness, particularly as they relate culturally to us. Our culture has its own form of macho, and other cultures have their form of macho. These are levels of unconsciousness that men are often having to deal with, that have to do with their strength, their fitness, their ability to provide, their ability to defend or to challenge and defeat. These are attitudes that I think are generally kind of obstacles to experiencing heaven. I mean, I don't think that there's any of that to speak of in heaven, really.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the characteristics that perhaps stereotypically, but nonetheless that one might attribute to femininity, to womanhood, are generally of a more spiritual nature, you know, sort of more cooperative and tolerant and, you know, all of those good things. Now, where it comes from, why that's the case, I wouldn't pretend to know, but women are a direct channel to the divine, so to speak, in that they give birth, and, you know, for men, there's not a heck of a lot involved in that process, you know.
Yeah, that would be a true statement. It's kind of like the women have the home field advantage on that one, right?
Yeah, and, you know, you've probably heard that people talking about how if men had babies, there would be statues of pregnant men all over the place. Heroic statues of guys who had twins and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't mean to deride either gender with stereotypes in any way. And in fact, in the book, in the middle part of the book, in the presence part, I go back into the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, the Gnostic Gospel, and the poetry of Rumi, which Coleman Barks actually gave me translations to use, which is really nice of him and really wonderful addition. But in Gnosticism, in Gnostic Christianity, it really is about bringing together your polarities, your lightness and your dark, and your contentment and your desire, and sort of, you know, fire and water, and male and female, and to be able to merge these aspects of oneself into kind of an androgynous spiritual being or presence to reunite with heaven. I mean, that's kind of the premise of Gnosticism, is that we're sparks of heaven that have broken away and forgotten that we belong there in this life, and so we're trying to reunify with that. And that comes to pass in Gnosticism by uniting these polarities. Every man has, you know, every yin has yang in it. Every yang has yin in it, you know. And so finding that balance and that merging is a part of getting to that place that we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, and, you know, even Ram Dass talks about how we're just all walking each other home. And so when we think about that and what you've been talking about in regards to, like, the polarities between the male and the female, you know, it brings to mind of just the compassion we also need to have for one another. Yeah.
I think that when I'm sitting around with a bunch of guys lots of times. I got to be compassionate for these guys.
Good thing they don't ask you what you're thinking about, right?
Right, yeah. But I can relate to all of it, and for most of us, man or woman, this experience of sadness and difficulty, pain, those are usually the things that, you know, cause the alchemy, that cause the transformative possibilities for us. I know, like I said in the book, there's a section about Rumi, who's this wonderful poet, you know, this Sufi poet, and Rumi met his doppelganger, so to speak, a fellow who completed him in the Almighty, so as it were. And when this guy disappeared from his life, he started walking in this circle, reciting this poetry of loss. And that circular walk is what the whirling dervishes are doing in Sufism, that beautiful whirling meditation, because when you face the pain and the difficulty and the sadness, in Sufism, they believe, you turn around and you face the opposite. And the other direction is bliss.
Yeah.
So facing the pain and the sadness enables you to discover that profound bliss and oneness, which I think is a lovely idea and something we can really apply in our lives, because we all have that experience of sadness opening our hearts, you know.
Well, and so kind of to piggyback on that, how does this all work with animals?
Well, I mean, one of the big things that I think that we need to realize to recognize heaven on this planet is that we are all the life. We are all the expression of divine consciousness on this world. And by all, I mean every form of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so the assumption that we have some kind of priority and therefore have the right to exploit everything, however we deem necessary to fulfill our desires, is damaging. It's on a spiritual level. We all walk around carrying this kind of burden of guilt of destroying this beautiful place, you know, and exploiting and damaging all this beautiful life. As they depart, as the animal species are departing this plane, as they're leaving this planet, they become more and more clearly beautiful divine expressions. I mean, you know, everybody is just amazed at how gorgeous and intelligent and soulful elephants are, largely because we are running out of elephants, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's our doing. We are the thing that makes us different from the rest of the animals. The rest of the animals are just connected. They're connected with our higher power, with the field of love and being already. They don't have these intricate thought processes that we do, but what those give us, what those make us, are stewards of the planet. So we are the stewards of this planet. We can restore it to the heaven that it was when we first got here, the heaven that indigenous people experienced for thousands of years. And one of the main ways of doing that for everybody at home, one person at a time, is to take up a much smaller footprint on the world. Use less, right? Be less extravagant with your needs. Switch to a plant-based diet, if at all possible, or start to bring vegetarianism into your diet so that you can pull back from that culture of exploitation and environmental degradation that's happening as a result of that, all of that factory animal farming and stuff. And utilize your relationship with pets and the animals that you see in memes online and the like to open your consciousness, open your heart, and experience the world in a more holistic way, in a more complete way. I know that when I became a vegetarian about 14 or 15 years ago, it has not affected my health in anything but a good way. But what it has done is it's lightened the sort of burden of guilt that I walked around with, you know, feeling like I was participating in something awful. You know, if I rent a gas-guzzling car, I feel badly driving around in it.
Yeah.
You know? I feel better when I rent a bicycle and I ride, and I do feel better. And to me, it's a similar kind of experience in terms of releasing the need to get our protein from these kind of exploitative factory situations that we have, so we can embrace the divinity that animals just have naturally.
Yeah, and be able to just, you know, be a little bit more conscious about the choices we're making. Right.
That's a big part of what going to heaven, metaphorically, as I talk about it, is being able to make these decisions that are based on a real spiritual sanity. You know, you look at a condition and maybe there's something that you can do about it that can help restore it to this place of sort of intuitively intelligent design.
You gotta love that. Well, gosh, I think we're kind of at the end of our time here, Robert. It goes by so quickly, I swear. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your book, How to Get to Heaven Without Really Dying?
Well, I have a new website up, which is just www.robert-kopecky.com. And then I have robert-kopecky.blogspot.com, which is my blog, Art, Faith, and the Cocoa Lion. And I get a lot of visitors there, so a lot of people see that there. I write a lot for themindfulword.org and appear on Gaia.com too. But my blog is a real good place to start because I'm always posting stuff there. And I love visitors.
Well, hey,
I'm part of,
Yeah. Well, and I'm part of your community, and so I get to see all of your great posts and the things that you do, and so it's been both you and Sue, your wife, and so you guys are kind of part of a dynamic duo, as far as dealing with the spirit world is concerned.
Yeah, I've learned an awful lot about animals because my wife is an animal communicator, and so that reality of the divine consciousness being expressed by animals is something that I cannot escape. I have it around here all the time. It's great.
Yeah, and when my dog Maxwell passed away, one of the first things I did was go make an appointment with Sue, and it really helps give a certain level of comfort, during a time that's can be a little difficult. So, well, gosh, Robert.
Yeah, for me, there's a lot of evidence of the reality of this extra dimension of love that's alive in this world that I witness through her work.
Oh, I'm sure she's dead on, just as you are with your book, How to Get to Heaven Without Really Dying. So. Well, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's really terrific to talk to you every time, Marianne. Thank you so much for having me, too.
Oh, Robert, thank you so much. It's always such a joy to spend time with you. For those of you that are interested in learning more about Robert's work, you can visit his website at robert-kopecky.com. His book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and all major retailers. And again, that book title is How to Get to Heaven Without Really Dying. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.